It's 5 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria. Time for the world today. Here's what's coming up within the hour. The Gaza Health Ministry says at least 27 people have been killed, 90 others injured in an Israeli fire while waiting for distribution aid. Billionaire businessman Bill Gates announces he'll begin to give away his wealth, at least $200 billion, over a time period. Plus, more than 200 inmates escaped jail in Pakistan following a series of earth tremors. Let's begin the world today. Welcome again to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Health officials in Gaza say at least 27 people have been killed, 90 more injured by Israeli fire while waiting for aid distribution in Rafah. Israel is refusing to acknowledge its military fired shots at civilians, but says they were targeted at several suspects. It is examining reports of casualties. Today's incident follows closely behind reports of another taking place on Sunday under similar circumstances. However, while Israel has confirmed troops did fire today, they deny doing so on Sunday. A British doctor has said the reported attacks was left to the Al-Mawasi hospital at pretty much 100% capacity. It comes as a new process for distributing aid has been established in the region, with Palestinians collecting aid from centers run by the U.S.-Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell refused to commit to an independent investigation into the events, saying that agreeing to such investigation depends on the situation. Meanwhile, UN agencies on the ground in Gaza say that there have been chaotic scenes at aid distribution points as Palestinians face acute food insecurity while queuing for food. Water shortages are also a daily problem for many Gazans, with access to clean water limited and desalination plants and wells affected by fuel shortages. The United Nations Humanitarian Agency, OCHA, said last week that 72% of Gaza's water, sanitation, and hygiene assets now fall within Israel's militarized zones or areas under displacement orders since March 18. The agency says this has severely disrupted access to water. The UN recommends every person has at least 7.5 liters of water per day for drinking, food, and personal hygiene. It says 2.5 liters is needed simply to maintain proper bodily function. However, estimates suggest that the amount of daily water the average person in Gaza has access to is far lower. We're staying with the situation in Gaza. The UN Human Rights Office has warned that blocking food and aid from reaching civilians in Gaza could amount to a war crime. It called the repeated attacks on people seeking assistance unconscionable. Spokesperson for UN Rights Chief Volker Turk says for a third day running, people were killed around aid distribution sites run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Turk has demanded a prompt, independent, and impartial investigation into the killings, saying attacks directed against civilians constitute a grave breach of international law and a war crime. Well, the man who shouted "Free Palestine" and used a makeshift flamethrower on demonstrators marching in support of Israeli hostages held by Hamas has been charged with attempted first-degree murder. The state of Colorado's charges against 45-year-old Mohammed Sabri Solomon of El Paso County include attempted first-degree murder after deliberation, attempted first-degree murder with extreme indifference, first-degree assault, including such against an at-risk victim older than 70, and possession of an incendiary device. Michael Doherty, district attorney for the Boulder area, said at a news conference a forthcoming formal filing of charges will reflect the latest victim count, which rose to 12 on Monday. Authorities initially said 8 people were hospitalized with burns and other impacts from the attack. We'll stay with the Colorado story for a bit and with how U.S. authorities are handling the situation. Our correspondent Maria Bird has been on the ground monitoring things from Washington.
The United States Attorney General's office announced late Monday that the federal charges for the suspect in the Boulder, Colorado attack were in accordance with the commission of a hate crime.
My office has charged Mohammed Sabri Solomon, age 45, with the commission of a hate crime under 18 U.S.C. Section 249. When that offense includes attempted murder, the statutory maximum federal sentence is life in prison.
The state district attorney's office in Colorado had a separate set of charges of attempted murder.
So there were 16 counts of attempted murder in the first degree. 8 of those counts are for attempted murder with intent and after deliberation. The other 8 counts are attempted murder with extreme indifference. So 16 counts total. If the defendant's convicted and those counts are running consecutive to one another, he would face a maximum of 384 years in state prison. He's also charged with 2 counts of use of an incendiary device. If convicted of those charges and they run consecutive, he would face a maximum sentence of 48 years. He's also charged with 16 other counts of attempted use of an incendiary device. And again, if convicted and if they run consecutive, the maximum on those counts would be 192 years. So 384 years on the attempted murder, 48 on the use of the Molotov cocktails, and then the attempted use would be 192 years.
The suspect in the Boulder, Colorado attack appeared in court after federal and state charges were announced.
All right, good afternoon. One second for the mutes. Good afternoon. We are on the record at this time in 25 CR 785. This is the matter concerning Mohammed Suleiman.
The suspect in the Boulder, Colorado attack has been assigned a public defender who was in attendance at his arraignment. The judge for the case has not yet set court dates for the federal or state charges. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channels Television News.
Let's bring in now National Security Risk Strategist Vince Onyekwelu. He's in Abuja. Vince, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
I think we're back to this question about morality in the war. I mean, speaking about the earlier stories we had, the attacks by Israeli forces on reportedly on civilians in Gaza. We're back to morality of the war. It's difficult to define in a time like this because both Israel and the people of Gaza both claim to be right in this instance.
It's unfortunate at this point in time, the Gaza-Israeli crisis, it's not a win-win situation for everybody because as much as I believe the Palestinians have a right to live their lives in freedom and liberty, the same way I strongly believe that the Israelis also
We do appear to be having problems with Vince's connectivity. We'll take a short break now on The World Today. Still ahead. Outrage in India over delayed medical attention for a 10-year-old girl who was raped in the state of Bihar. Welcome back to The World Today. We're looking at our lead story today of 27 people killed in the Gaza enclave, part of Rafah, after Israeli forces reportedly opened fire, as a result of a fire, by Israeli forces on civilians who were trying to get aid from an aid truck by the United Nations, as well as other aid agencies. This is not the first time the Israeli army has been accused of firing on civilians or attacking civilians as they try to get aid in the course of the war in Gaza. National Security Risk Strategist Vince Onyekwelu uh, joined us earlier just before the break. We're glad to have him back. Vince, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. I can hear you.
Great. I'm glad we got our connectivity back. And you were talking about the difficult situation that we're in, trying to balance the morality of the war. The Israelis seeing this as, them trying to go after Hamas, winning this war against militants in Gaza, preventing them returning to Israel to carry out more attacks than the one carried out in 2023. And those in Gaza just seeing themselves as being victims of genocide.
Obviously, it's difficult for me to say that it's genocide. Rather, I would say it's one of those outcomes in a war situation. Personally, no one wishes for war in any part of the world. What is happening in Gaza right now is probably not the best strategy, because we must remember that the reason why the GHF, that is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, was asked to come in and do this job with the Israeli is because of the trust lost between the Israeli and the United Nations. Because the UNRWA, the Nations Refugee and Works Agency, were seriously accused with very indicting evidences found of a collaboration between them and Hamas. So the UN and the Israelis do not trust each other. So the reason they brought in the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, was to see how humanitarian aid can come into Gaza after 11 weeks of seizure. Now, what's going on there is a lot of propaganda is being played out. I believe the Palestinians have a right to live their lives fully. I also believe that Israelis have the right to live their lives fully without anybody trying to say they're going to cancel them from the face of the maps. So basically, whoever tries to interfere in this situation, there will always be games or propaganda against the person. Personally, I do not believe that the Israelis fired at those civilians. That is my personal opinion, and it's based on facts. Because um, number one, you cannot expect the GHF and the Israelis to invite these civilians to come to Rafah to get humanitarian aid that we are paid mostly by Israelis and other countries of the world, not paid by Palestine. So if the Hamas believes that what the GHF and Israelis are doing is going to take away power from the hands of the Hamas, don't forget that Hamas used food, fear, energy, anything possible to hold the people down, to increase their authority, their control over the people in Palestine, and obviously to recruit future soldiers. So what Israelis are doing and the Americans are doing is taking that control, that authority away from Hamas. So they're going to find every possible propaganda, every possible reasons to fight this current strategy. Also, the UN felt that they've been sidelined, so they're always going to fight for their survival. Because without the UN getting involved in this kind of global crisis, then they're not relevant anymore. So I don't believe that the Israelis fired upon these people. Whoever fired upon these people is obviously using that as a propaganda to find reason to find fault in the USA and the Israeli food aid distribution. Thank you.
I really don't doubt, what you're saying, because even aid groups around the world have said, there is the possibility of propaganda being propagated on the ground. As it stands now, it is only the Gaza Health Ministry that's reporting on the number of wounded and killed in the enclave. But about the aid now, while Israel is allowing, aid into the enclave, it does appear that the 100 or so trucks on the ground are not enough to meet the needs that already exist. And that's because there was already so much hunger and need on the ground in Gaza. And
Obviously,
these aid trucks are coming weeks
with the
after.
issues around the aid, um, yeah, if you're talking about the aid coming into Gaza right now, we believe that the Israelis have been on the back foot lately because of the 11 weeks they blocked those kind of humanitarian aids coming into the Gaza Strip. And the pressure is mounting on the Israelis to allow more food aid to come into Gaza. And obviously, Mr. Donald Trump, the US president, also supported the idea of UN stepping aside and allowing the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to support in the distribution of food aid. However, without being biased, a lot of schools of thought believes that the strategy is like trying to get the people of Gaza to leave their homes and go to that end of Gaza in Rafah, which is at the extreme end of the Gaza Strip. And once you do that, there is fears that people may not be allowed to return back to their homes. However, there are no empirical, credible evidences that nobody has been stopped from going back to their homes after receiving aid from Rafah. So basically, there needs to be a lot of going back to the planning table to make sure that one, that food gets to the people of Gaza. Two, that they don't allow Hamas to take control of this distribution of food or even try to store food or seize food or weaponize this distribution of food or aids to the masses. And number three, to find a possible solution to end this crisis. And you will understand with me that Hamas are seriously on the back foot right now because they've lost that ability, that capacity to be able to send missiles into Israel. And right now they are fighting this war in their own space. Many of their top militants, many of their top officers are being taken away. On the side of the Israelis, they're also struggling because those 58 hostages that they are still looking for, it's beggars believe how those 58 can be hidden somewhere inside Gaza, and Israelis with their technology, with their warfare capacity, have been unable to know where they are in Gaza Strip. It's kind of a disgrace on the name of the IDF. So both sides are fighting on the back foot. However, the way it's going, the Israelis have an upper hand, but the world needs to find a solution to this crisis. Over to you, Amarachi.
And the ripple effects of the war is what we're seeing, with the attacks in the United States a few weeks ago. A couple that just got engaged, that was soon to be engaged from the Israeli community, from Israel, beg your pardon, were killed in Washington, D.C. And then just earlier this week, we saw the attack from a pro-Palestinian person, I believe, who had feelings against the pro-Israeli group that were holding a peaceful protest in Colorado, who were injured, by this individual. His case in court right now, and he's facing jail time, definitely. What do you think would help to stem, the aftermath and the fallout of this war? No matter whose side anyone is on, how do people express, or how should people express whatever feelings they have about the war, especially where other people from the opposing side are involved?
I believe, let me take the issue of Colorado first of all. I believe the gentleman in Colorado that did the crime he did, I think it's quite despicable on his side. Because number one, he came to the US for a better life, and his visa has expired in the US. And the best he could do was to go and harm elderly people in their 80s. I would have thought that if he's man enough, he should have looked for people of his size and of his age to see how strong or how huge or how strong a man he is, not looking for the elder state people and hurting them. And I think it sends a strong message across the world that when you choose to come to somebody's country and you decide to be there illegally, and you now choose a life of crime, you're going to do a life of time. They're talking about 80 years, 40 years, over 100 years. I think it sends a strong warning out there to the people across the Western world. Like, come to the Western world to do a crime because of the war in Ukraine or in Russia or in Gaza or Israel or any part of the world. You have to answer for your crime. Then on the issue of a lasting peace with the Gaza-Israeli war, it's quite disgraceful because most of us were given birth to and we met this Gaza-Israeli crisis. It's in so many history books across the library uh, shelves. And I think I support the idea of the two-state solution, a solution where Israel will have a right to live their lives, and a solution where Palestinians will have a right to live their lives too. I don't believe, it hurts me to hear that Palestinians cannot leave their country. They cannot get a visa to go to any part of the world freely. They have to be permitted by the Israelis. Personally, I don't support that. That is like slavery. That is like worse than apartheid. However, I don't believe the idea of the Palestinians that believe they need to wipe off Israel from the map of the world. I think that's silly. Obviously, you cannot do that. Technologically, they are smarter than you. Financially, they're stronger than you. Globally, they are more connected than you. So I think Palestinians can live a better life to make peace with Israel. And Israel is saying, return our 58 hostages. And I think they should go back to that drawing table and return those hostages. And Israel will return most of their prisoners that is in Israeli cells or prisons. I think that's a win-win situation. Right now, Gaza is being malnourished. Beautiful country has been destroyed. I'm not sure they're going to be able to restructure Gaza in the next 50 or 100 years. So I think Hamas needs to know if they are fighting for the people or if they are fighting for their own pockets. Because honestly, the level of harm to the lives of people in Gaza, it's unfair to the people in Gaza. It's still unfair to the Israelis that have to live under the Iron Dome because of shells and missiles coming from Gaza. There's a lot of hatred. This is no longer war. This is like a brotherly blood hatred. It's no longer war. I think this has to be solved. Thank you.
Vince, thank you so much for your thoughts and analysis on the issue. Appreciate your joining us here on The World Today.
Thanks for having me.
We're on to the man now who has so much money. He's decided to give $200 billion of it away. We're talking about Bill Gates, who's announced plans to spend as much as $200 billion of his fortune on improving health and education services across Africa. Mr. Gates made the announcement during an address at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa on Monday. He said that unleashing human potential by improving health and education should put every country in Africa on a path to prosperity. He's also urged the continent's young innovators to think about how to use artificial intelligence to improve healthcare. Last month, the 69-year-old announced that he would give away 99% of his vast fortune by 2045, by when the Gates Foundation plans to end its operations. Writing in blog posts last month, he said that people will say a lot of things about him when he dies, but he is determined that he died rich will not be one of them. Joining us now is international developmental analyst Dr. Adirunke Kujore. She joins us from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Dr. Kujore, for joining us on the program.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to get your thoughts before we go into the conversation proper, what Bill Gates said about himself. He says people will say a lot of things about him when he dies, but he's determined that he died rich will not be one of them. Giving away $200 billion, that doesn't mean that Bill Gates will be poor, does it?
No, it doesn't mean that he will be poor. Obviously, he has more than enough to live and live until his death. I think it is actually a pretty exciting announcement that he made. I think that it is hopefully a call to other wealthy individuals around the world, whether it's within Africa or outside of Africa, that this might be an interesting way to spend the rest of their lives, or an interesting way to allocate the rest of their funds. I think what it shows us is he's seen enough wealth, and he's also seen enough poverty across the world that he has decided that, it's better for him to, give it away than take it with him. I think my mother used to say, live simply so that others can simply live. And for me, this is basically a show of the fact that he understands the state of things within Africa, and he would rather ensure that some people get a chance at a better life than die with all of that wealth.
So the good news is much of that money is coming to Africa, but it's not coming to the governments. The money has not been attributed to any of the governments in Africa, but to projects on the continent. From your perspective, what sectors do you think would be needing it the most?
So there are a few. I would say that definitely education. Until we have a populace that has the basics in education, I think we will continue to struggle. So it would be nice to see a lot of those funds go into education. Healthcare is another area that I think he has shown his interest in over time, that I think is important for us to see some of those funds go into across Africa. I think it's, when you look at the state of primary health care across the continent, there's definitely a lot of room for, centers and staff and things like that across the continent. The third thing I would say that is probably going to be long lasting is ensuring accessibility to energy and internet infrastructure. We still have too many dark spots across the continent that I think will benefit significantly from being able to basically communicate across across the globe, or, communicate with our largest cities. So those will be three big areas, but then there's also things like, agriculture or entrepreneurial ventures that could benefit from it. But I will start with education, health, and infrastructure across the country from from an energy perspective and also from an internet perspective.
We already know that Bill Gates is one of the biggest philanthropists of our time, but there are times when even aid does seem to be a bribe, I will say, to certain individuals and to certain organizations and countries. Do you think that's a likelihood here for Mr. Gates, what he will gain, as he gives away the bulk of his wealth?
Sometimes I think the backlash that he gets is somewhat unfair. He's an individual first before anything. And so as individuals, we always have our personal opinions or, preferences in terms of where, what happens in the world, whether or not he has money. But I think what really sits well for me with what he's decided to do is he's actually attributed 99%, which is record breaking if you look back at all of the wealthy individuals that we've seen, and what percentages of their wealth they donate in their lifetime or after. To date, I don't believe we've seen anyone donate at this magnitude. And I think this magnitude speaks to the fact that he's truly altruistic and is looking to do as much good as he can with all that he has at this point. Yeah.
Is that something is that a character that's acquired, when you become that wealthy, that you become more altruistic, you become very unselfish with your wealth, and you want to do a lot of good? Or is that just because of the kind of person that he is?
So I actually believe it's the kind of person that he is. There's a lot of research that talks about the fact that if you're not able to give, or you're not able to serve with little, it actually becomes more difficult to do it when you have more. I think many times when people become wealthy, it is more publicly seen or felt or known. But it's one of those things that if you just don't have things like empathy for the person beside you, you could be driving, a Porsche and not even see that there's a little child begging for a piece of bread beside you. So, when you think about, how wealthy people, spend their money or whether or not they're altruistic, I don't believe it's something that is, that every wealthy person acquires. I think it's something that is taught from childhood. People, parents teaching their children to, share a biscuit or something that's small. And that continues to develop over a lifetime to the point where you still continue to have empathy for people around you. And I think that's what's happening here. He has been exposed enough to some of the pain and suffering and poverty in different areas of Africa and has decided that, okay, this is where his funds will go. We have a lot of wealthy people that are not giving half as much of, in terms of percentages of their wealth to these kinds of efforts. Some even don't give anything at all. Sometimes they give just to shut the world up and make sure that people aren't talking about them in a negative light. But I think this is the first of its kind, and it's definitely commendable.
And on a lighter note, Dr. Kujore, can we all be as rich as Bill Gates?
Wouldn't we all like to be as rich as Bill Gates? Unfortunately, that's not going to happen, and I think it's only because of simple reasons. There are things that make people wealthy that many people just don't have, whether it's things like your mindset or the ability to sacrifice something today for a future investment, savings, investing, not spending all you have. Those are oftentimes skills that the average person finds very difficult. I was looking at the amount that he was, that he's going to be donating, and I said, if you split that across every single individual in Africa, I think we're about 1.5 billion or something. Anyway, if you split that across each and every one of us, maybe we'll all get, 200,000 naira or something of that sort. And I can bet you the majority will blow it, right? Because if you don't have those skills in terms of being able to save or invest or grow what you have, you can't be wealthy. It's just, it's not rocket science. And so we can't all be, but we hope that those who have acquired some wealth, any kind of wealth, will, find it in their hearts to find ways to use that leverage to make our continent a better one. We have a lot of wealthy people on the continent, and we hope that this is sort of a good example that inspires others to follow suit and make sure that we continue to lift the country out of its current state.
Dr. Aderonke Kujore, thank you again for teaching us. We can be wealthy, if we do what Bill Gates is doing. Not giving up or giving out all of our wealth, but of course, making the right investments. Thank you for joining us on the program.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
A quick stopover in Ukraine as a second round of direct peace talks between Russia and Ukraine have ended without a major breakthrough. Only a deal to swap more prisoners of war. Ukrainian negotiators said Russia had again rejected an unconditional ceasefire, a key demand by Kyiv and its allies in Europe and the US, but the two committed to return the bodies of 12,000 soldiers. The Russian team said it had proposed a 2 or 3 day truce in certain areas of the vast front line, but gave no further details. In Monday's talks, which were held in the Turkish city of Istanbul, and lasted over an hour, the two sides did agree to exchange all sick and heavily wounded prisoners of war, as well as those under the age of 25. Expectations were low, however, even before the talks started, with both sides remaining deeply divided on how to end a war that has been raging since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022. Dozens of healthcare workers from Buenos Aires Garragan Pediatric Hospital, alongside hundreds of protesters, gathered on Monday night at the city's iconic obelisk to rally for better wages and fair working conditions. Protesters held candles, and hospital staff formed a human chain in front of the monument. Many carried signs reading "Everyone in Garragan" and "No to defunding Garragan Hospital." An emotional altar was also assembled, featuring photographs of young patients treated at the renowned pediatric facility. Protesters announced a dramatic erosion of their incomes, with salaries that have reportedly fallen below the poverty line. Beyond the wage issues, demonstrators highlighted an acute shortage of essential medical supplies at the hospital, making proper patient care nearly impossible. It's election day in South Korea, and opposition party's Lee Jae-myung is certain to become president in the first election since impeachment chaos. That's according to the country's top broadcasters. Millions voted today in a snap election triggered by former President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment over his failed martial law bid. Earlier polls also put Lee Jae-myung ahead of the ruling party's Kim Moon-soo, a former member of Yoon's cabinet. The election has been shaped by the fallout from Yoon's brief but disastrous move in December, which triggered divisive protests and months of political chaos in the country. The death of a 10-year-old rape victim in the eastern Indian state of Bihar after an alleged delay in medical treatment has sparked outrage in the country. The girl died on Sunday morning at the state government-run Patna Medical College and Hospital in the capital, Patna. Her uncle alleged the child's condition worsened as she was kept waiting in an ambulance for around 4 hours on Saturday before being admitted to hospital. PMCH authorities have denied this, saying the claims of a delay in admission are baseless. The girl's death has made national headlines, with opposition leaders accusing the Bihar government, a coalition led by the Bharatiya Janata Party and Janata Dal United, of gross mismanagement. The government has denied any negligence. Police have reported that more than 200 prisoners escaped from a jail in Pakistan's largest city following an earthquake. Thousands of inmates broke down doors and locks of their cells and shattered windows after they felt tremors shake the walls at a Malli jail in Karachi. Police said 80 inmates have been recaptured and searches are ongoing for more than 130 still at large. One prisoner was killed in the operation and 2 police officers injured. A prison superintendent told the LAG inmates began shouting from their cells and barracks around midnight as they were terrified the building would collapse on them. Mongolia's prime minister has resigned after social media photos of his son's lavish lifestyle sparked an anti-corruption investigation and weeks of mass protests. The prime minister, who is denied wrongdoing, lost a confidence vote in parliament. The viral photos purport to show his son and his girlfriend flaunting a black Dior shoulder bag and several shopping bags while on their engagement holiday. Protesters questioned how the prime minister's family could afford such luxurious lifestyle. Meanwhile, local media reports that the country's anti-corruption body has been looking into their finances. We're off on another break on The World Today, still ahead. How long can you play the piano? Ruslan Ishdavyatov broke his own record by playing for 60 straight hours. How did he do it? Stay with us to find out. Monday was election day at the UN General Assembly. Foreign Minister for Germany, Annalena Baerbock, was elected to head the 193-member world body in a secret ballot vote, making her the 5th woman to be elected in this capacity. And when Baerbock appeared before the Assembly to discuss her candidacy on May 15, Russia's Deputy UN Ambassador, Dmitry Polyansky, lashed into her, saying that she has repeatedly proven her incompetence, extreme bias, and lack of understanding of the basic principles of diplomacy. Baerbock ended up getting 167 votes, almost double the 88 votes needed to win, while high-ranking German diplomat Helga Schmidt received 7 votes as a write-in and 14 countries abstained. Meanwhile, Nigeria's diplomat Ezekwesili David Anyegbu, vice chair of the 79th session of the UN Second Committee, presided over that election. Anyegbu is one of the very few Nigerians in history to be elected as a principal officer of a UN session.
I call to order the 27th meeting of the Second Committee at the 79th session of the General Assembly. Distinguished delegates, before proceeding to the election of the Chair and other members of the Bureau of the Second Committee for the 8th session of the General Assembly, I first invite the committee to fill the vacancy of the unaspired term of the Chair of the Second Committee at its 79th session. Following the completion of the tour of duty in New York of His Excellency Mohammad Abdul Wahid of Bangladesh, the group of Asian Pacific states has endorsed the candidature of His Excellency Salahuddin Noman Chowdhury, permanent representative of Bangladesh to the United Nations, to complete the remainder of the term of the post of Chair of the Second Committee at its 79th session. In the absence of any other nomination, I propose that in accordance with the rules 103 and 105 of the Rules of Procedure and established practice, the committee decides to elect by acclamation His Excellency Salahuddin Noman Chowdhury of Bangladesh to complete the remainder of the term of the Chair of the Second Committee at its 79th session. I hear no objection. It is so decided. I congratulate Ambassador Chowdhury on his election and invite him to the podium to take over the proceedings of the meeting. Please remain seated. The meeting will continue momentarily. I thank you.
Authorities in Portugal and Germany have launched a new search for missing British toddler Madeleine McCann nearly 20 years after her disappearance. Madeleine was 3 years old when she vanished from an apartment complex in Praia da Luz in the Algarve during a family holiday on May 3, 2007. Portuguese and German police began searching Praia da Luz on Monday, following leads linked to a German suspect who was in the area at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. Earlier today, a Portuguese fire engine and 4 vehicles carrying German police arrived at the search site. The search spans 21 plots of land and will continue until Friday. It's centered around the municipality of Lagos, about 3.5 miles from where the McCann family had stayed. An update now on a story we've been following from Australia. Erin Patterson, the woman accused of cooking a deadly mushroom meal that killed 3 of her relatives, has told a court she preferred the taste of wild mushrooms. She's pleaded not guilty to the murder of 3 relatives and the attempted murder of another after serving them death-cap mushrooms at a home in July of 2023. Prosecutors say she deliberately put the poisonous mushrooms in the meal, but her defense team says it was just a terrible accident. An activist from Greenpeace France staged a dramatic protest in Paris by stealing a wax figure of French President Emmanuel Macron from the Gaza Museum and placing it outside the Russian embassy. The stunt aimed to condemn France's alleged trade ties with Moscow, arguing Macron is supporting Kyiv politically while continuing to import energy and agricultural products from Russia. The activists disguised as tourists to smuggle the 40,000 euro statue out of the museum under a blanket. Outside the embassy, they held banners and posed a sculpture beside a framed photo of Russian President Vladimir Putin. One activist accused Macron of hypocrisy, saying the president criticizes a war while importing Russian energy and fertilizers worth billions of euros. Another said they deliberately chose Macron's likeness to highlight his personal role in European policy on Russian imports. The Gaza Museum has not yet commented on the incident. We're off to China's Guangdong province, where thousands gathered to watch the drift and dragon boat race in Foshan's Diaozhou town. The Dragon Boat Festival is an ancient tradition passed down through generations, but features paddlers performing high-speed twists and sharp turns in narrow waterways. The festival commemorates an ancient poet Chu Yuan and has now grown into a major cultural event celebrated across Asia. Diezhou town has extensive water network of streams and creeks that extend over 20 kilometers. Historical records indicate that town's ancestors built 9 rivers and canals for irrigation, with sharp turns in the rivers creating ideal conditions for drifting. Locals believe that completing a perfect round in the river brings good luck. Soothing your evening with some music, but for how long can you play and how long can you listen? In St. Petersburg in Russia, musician Ruslan Ishdaletov has set a new world record for the longest continuous improvisation playing. He played for 60 hours straight. Ishdaletov performed on the piano at a local restaurant at midnight on May 27 and played without a break for 2.5 days until noon of May 29th. From midnight on May 27 until noon of May 29, Ishdaletov performed at the local restaurant with only brief interruptions as his support team kept him alert. He said that he was in a trance after completing the feat, calling it his most personal and challenging accomplishment yet. He's credited his fiancée Svetlana as his greatest inspiration and says he's already considering attempting a 70-hour marathon. Let's hope their love keeps growing as strong as his playing. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.